who's now Dr. Tom Williams. Would you like to come up and do your public comments as we wait for a quorum? But we are officially meeting now on this day, Wednesday, the 22nd of February, 2012. And Mr. Parks is entering the room, so we now do have a quorum for this meeting. Hello, Mr. Parks. Okay, you're up. Dr. Tom Williams.
Dr. Tom Williams, LA 32 Neighborhood Council, El Serrano also. We're having a problem with traffic. It's called the Huntington Drive and also Monterey Road. Now the Bureau of Engineering is going to demolish one of the landmark bridges at Soto, Mission, Huntington Drive, widen Soto to 2 lanes each way, and widen the bridge down at Soto and Valley. This is a project that was originated about 2001, almost 10 years plus, and it's just now being placed upon the public. However, the problem that we have with it is that we have not been given the numbers. What's the traffic counts now, or in 2001 and now? And what sort of traffic model was used to project the future traffic once you take Soto from 1 lane each way to 2 lanes each way and debottleneck at Huntington Drive and Valley? We're quite concerned that our theoretical capacity right now is around 40,000 cars a day on Huntington Drive. We're also starting to pick up sizable traffic from Monterey Road. It's all going to go as a north-south bypass of Fremont in Alhambra, South Pasadena. Why? Because it's plugged up, so they want to plug up Monterey Road, Huntington Drive, and Soto. We would like to get the numbers from Department of Transportation regarding what the model shows for the intersection of Huntington Drive, Soto, Mission, and for Valley and Soto. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Okay, we've got 4 items on the agenda. Item number 1 is a motion by Mr. Parks and myself. Ann, would you read it?
It's a motion by Parks Rosendahl requesting that the Los Angeles County Metropolitan Transportation Authority work with LADOT to develop a plan to accommodate parking during the construction phase of the Crenshaw-LAX Transit Corridor project.
Appreciate that. And Mr. Caress has joined us, so now we're 4 out of 5. We have a super quorum almost, a full council meeting. Okay, Mr. Parks, this is a request that you had. We obviously want to move forward and support the Crenshaw-LAX transit car. Please explain.
One thing, and we have someone from DOT. I think what's important here is that DOT, in responding to the EIR, identified all of these issues, I think, during the process. Problem is, MTA didn't view them in the same regard. And so we're now confronted with, as this being one of the first projects out of the Measure R package, that there is going to be a major negative impact if we lose 300 parking places during the construction within this small business area. And so our goal is to, with this motion, is to get the MTA to reassess and to reconsider their prior judgments during the EIR. And I think the DOT report is very clear what they thought was going to happen, and months later it's going to happen. And so that's what we'd like to make sure, that what your original thoughts were on this, basically we make it public to the MTA. And if there's additional concerns that came about since the EIR, that we add that also. And I don't know what the best process, is it letter or working with MTA and their working group, or how do we get this addressed as it relates to that area?
Good afternoon. My name is Kang Hu. I'm a senior transportation engineer with LADOT. Councilman Parks, we fully agree with the motion that this is an issue that needs to be addressed. We are working very closely with MTA on this parking issue now. Back in 2009, LADOT submitted the comments that we expressed the concern of the large parking lots in that area. MTA's response at that time was they did a utilization study. They found the parking utilization is somewhat low, and they feel that there are enough parking spaces available in that area. But we remain concerned that we want to work with them. The first priority for us is to minimize the parking impact during the construction period. There will be even a little more than 300 parking spaces lost during the construction. But we are working with them on their staging plans to see whether the curbside parking can be restored during the construction. Granted, there will be parking impact during the construction, but we're trying to minimize that. And on a permanent basis, we are also going to look at very carefully about their utilization study on a block-by-block basis. We want to identify hot spots where parking demands are high, such as there's a post office, there's a Crenshaw High School, and there's also Parkview High School and Middle School, those charter school area, and there are also other commercial area near Slauson that parking demands are high. We want to look at those areas carefully and then find out whether there will be a shortage in parking available. So after identifying the parking hotspots, and then we will develop solutions with MTA. MTA has been served notice on this, and they are working with us very closely. I think this council motion has served its purpose. Within the next 3 months, we want to develop a list of solutions and perhaps come back to the Transportation Committee.
The other thing we'd like to make sure of is that in addition to the parking shortfall, that the fear, and I think we've seen it on other lines that were built through commercial areas, the loss of business. Because if you don't have parking and people can't get to your business, you're not going to be there long. So the last thing we need is a spiffy new line down Crenshaw and then find out at the end of the day most of the businesses had to disappear. And so that's one of the charges. It's not only to find parking, but like I said, the mitigation, the staging, all have to be considered as how do we secure those businesses that stay on Crenshaw Boulevard.
Yeah, I think that's a very high priority issue that we have to work with MTA, and they are aware of that, and they want to work with the city to minimize the impact.
Okay. What do you think on timing as far as when we'll get a sense of how they're going to address this on a permanent basis?
On the permanent basis, first we have to complete the...
Well, I mean, when I say permanent, not after the line, I mean a permanent solution for this construction period.
Are you talking about the impact during the construction or the permanent?
No, I want to talk about the impact during construction first. When will we get an idea of when they will have a plan to address that?
Their consultants are developing a series of worksite traffic control plans and then the staging plans. And I would imagine within the next few months that they will be able to come up with. But then they're also issuing an RFP to get a contractor on board. The contractor will not be on board until toward the end of the calendar year. And
that contractor to do what now? What is that contractor being hired to do?
The contractor will be developing a detailed staging plan. At this time, it's a conceptual staging plan that we're working with MTA, and we're trying to make a condition as favorable to the city as possible so that the contractor can comply with that requirement. But then when the contractor is on board, they will be preparing a detailed staging plan that will be reviewed by the city before they start the construction.
Okay, now when do we think about starting construction?
I think the construction will probably start toward the end of, or maybe the beginning of 2014, because it takes about a year to do the detailed design.
So the beginning of 2014?
Yes, that's my understanding.
Well, the thing is, if we can ask for, I guess, you said that the consultant won't be on board until December?
Yes, that's the tentative schedule.
All right. If we could ask for a report back, say, the first quarter of 2013,
Okay.
and that way we can get an update. And if there's stuff that happens in between there that's of interest, you make sure we're aware of it. we need to be of assistance if MTA is not cooperating?
Well, and I think the department met with MTA today. They have another meeting scheduled in early March to lay out some of the issues. We can get some of the timeline, a little more of that. If there are still some significant issues at that point that we can highlight, we'll bring that back right away.
Thank you.
So basically, Mr. Parks is asking for this to report back in next year, about March, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, I'll obviously support that. Any comments?
Just a comment right there. We, in a project like this, do not pay or do we compensate for lost business?
I think MTA has a program to,
I don't know if they do. So I think we should find out to be true, I say, Mr. Parks, on this here. I know Water and Power is building a big water line, and they're building the public street. And the public, people are upset, but the public is being benefited because it's a future water line. On this, the future rail line, I don't know if there's compensation. Sometimes they get, I know when they built the Wilshire subway, there was lawsuits by private property owners to the RTD. I don't know if Mr. De La Vega knows this at all or has any history with this. Is there compensation for businesses or lost business? When they are, Maria, you would know, you're an expert.
It depends on the project, and we'll have to check with MTA and see what program they have in place for this project.
Okay, so why don't we do that to make sure they know that? And I also know, Mr. Parks, on some of these impacted, you could be very creative with your engineers. I see Mr. Gallagher, one of the most creative back there, in creating areas that are not in the construction zone, but where people could park. You know, I know there's a lot of displacement, but I know you got a big task there, Mr. Parks, with the rail line coming. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Labange, for adding that to the motion and going forward with that. We'd appreciate it. Mr. Press, anything on this? Okay, so moved. Thank you very much for your report and update. Item number 2.
Item number 2 is the DOT report requesting authority to not enforce certain categories of parking laws in the Los Angeles Municipal Code.
Take us through this, because there was some anecdotal conversations others have had with me about street sweeping moments when there might be some religious or something else going on. How do you deal with the ticketing on that? Talk about what this report will do.
Certainly. Robert Andalon, Department of Transportation. With me is the Chief Savali, representing parking enforcement.
Welcome, new Chief.
Thank you, sir.
In response to your question regarding the history of this parking accommodations, this was set up as a procedure within DOT to allow for certain events within each of the council districts that required special consideration for the overflow of visitors or areas that are impacted for construction projects, or in this case, religious holidays, where there's a large number of individuals that would attend certain functions. What we've done is work with each of the specific council offices to identify those streets and those restrictions, and then we've communicated that through our engineering group to the parking enforcement group. What this report does purports to do is ask the council to codify this within the existing authority vested within council to allow DOT to move forward with this program in a more transparent manner.
Thank you for that, and I know Mr. Koretz has some questions too, but please, the new Chief, introduce yourself a little bit and reflect on what you see in this motion.
Yes, thank you. My name's Greg Savelli. Just started with the department on the 17th of last month, and been getting a crash course on everything here in the city. Been very supported by staff and, of course, Mr. De La Vega in getting started. In this motion, sir, what we have is we're basically trying to make sure that we apply the rules fairly and equitably across all council districts, and to ensure that everybody knows what the rules are going in, so it doesn't have an appearance of giving preferential treatment to one or another.
But in that context, as part of the homework, we've talked to the council offices about special events and special situations on special days in each of their districts, correct?
Correct.
So that it will be clear enough from the council office perspective and your office that we're in one of those sensitive modes and we wouldn't be ticketing at that time.
We will work with the administrative procedures, and we'll be coming back to report to you on what those procedures are. So we've identified certain categories already that we believe would cover the vast majority, but if there are other categories that we need to add, we will certainly go ahead and do that. We will also communicate back to each of the council offices how we will make those go into effect.
Excellent. Mr. Kretz.
Yeah, I mean, in my district, we haven't had a lot of problems with the requests that we've made, and typically the most frequent ones are related to Jewish religious holidays and shivas. The one category I see not included currently is for social events or large parties, which is probably our third most frequent ask. And I think that would probably cause some sort of a difficulty. I would imagine not only in my district, but I know specifically from my experience in my district. Why is that not on the list, and can we find some way to get it back on the list?
Well, depending on the location or where the festivities are being held, there are preferential parking districts. Under the rules, the owner of the facility that's hosting the party could purchase guest permits for those individuals. If there is a number beyond that, then it still needs to be exempted. That's something we can look at. If you notice, the preferential parking restrictions are listed as one of those restrictions that we would be able to not enforce. Again, it depends. It's a policy decision regarding the use of public streets and whether it's consistent with what the council would like to do.
Yeah, well, I for one would like to still have some flexibility in that regard. So I'd certainly encourage us to look at that as an add-on. Will there be some sort of a formal document that our offices can circulate to constituents formalizing the requests for parking now that there's a more formal process?
Yes, as part of our report back, we will provide administrative guidelines that we will circulate to each of the council offices, and in turn, they can be distributed to the neighborhood councils or any other individuals that would have interest in this particular activity.
And if a request doesn't meet the limited criteria that you have, what's the process for restricting parking for a purpose not listed currently?
Well, this is open for discussion. If there's other activities that would be required, we would review them on an ad hoc basis, and given the circumstances and the council members' preference, we could certainly look at including that as an exception basis.
Jaime de la Vega, DOT. If I just add to that, obviously the council would retain full discretion by motion to not enforce any portion of the municipal code. So you'd always have that flexibility. And then on your prior point, Councilman, if I could suggest maybe the CLA could suggest language, or we should just modify or amend the staff report to include, the last accommodation which you discussed. So it's very clear that that's what we're including in the policy.
I think that would be preferable to having to do a council motion when people have large parties. That seems like an overly bureaucratic approach. So if we could just add that to the list, okay, I'd certainly appreciate that.
And let me just take that with a bunch of questions for the record, as well as I'm sure it's anticipating some of my colleagues' questions as well. What we have before us today is an attempt to formalize, in a sense, how we do relaxed parking restrictions under specific circumstances. Mm-hmm. Isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
That's always been a funny word, relaxed parking. Could you tell us what the most common type of request for relaxed enforcement of parking restrictions is? Also, could you go through what type of events would be eligible for relaxed enforcement? Just give us the best you can on that question.
The most common is probably preferential parking district. There are some other violations that we did not include, which would be street sweeping. That would be among those group. Again, that's a policy decision. The different types of categories we've listed in our report, which would be elections, funerals, designated city holidays, religious holidays, school events, open houses, back-to-school nights. There's some unusual occurrences, work by fellow city departments that would encompass opening up streets and closing off areas, thereby relocating those residents to other streets, and then special events that occur within the council offices or the mayor's office hosting an activity within their specific district.
And I see, of course, political things, elected officials. Could you explain a more detailed description of an elected official event? How that works?
Yeah,
Please.
for example, sometimes the mayor and council might host a foreign dignitary, a head of state, consul general, ambassador at the Getty House, for example, or another city facility, and there may be parking restrictions in place which would need to be not enforced in order to accommodate that event.
Mhm. Of course, we do that also with the President of the United States and foreign dignitaries.
He would be a good example
With the
of somebody
Secret
covered by
Service
this.
or with the State Department, as we just went through with both the foreign official and our president. And what, just in a general sense, what type of parking restrictions will be eligible for relaxed enforcement and which will not? Do you feel comfortable the list includes what we need to do?
Well, with the addition of what you folks were just talking about, the preferential district,
Right.
we cannot relax state law. We can only relax city rules. So those would be the focus on the ones that we've listed here in municipal codes in the city.
The report does not mention street sweeping, which I mentioned in the very beginning.
That's correct.
I think that needs to be included because we can't tell people they won't receive tickets on the high holy days or a funeral and then have them receive a street sweeping citation. Can we add that, obviously, to the list when we're dealing with an event?
Yes, we can, sir.
Okay. All right. Who in the department will have approval authority?
The intention is to have Chief Sabelli and then his subordinate supervisors have authority. Really, the idea is to streamline it so that, your staff can go directly to the chief and to the area captain in your geographic area and just process that.
Very good. And how will the council office or mayor's office formally make a request?
We can receive a request from your chief of staff through email or whatever format we establish in the administrative procedure.
I think the goal is to make it as simple as possible. So assuming we know who your chief of staff is, which we do, and we receive that correspondence, we'll process that immediately.
And how quickly will the administrative procedures be drafted and complete?
We anticipate within the next 30 to 45 days, we can come back and report with those administrative procedures.
I'd like to have them back before the committee, obviously, before we can give final approval. So you see that?
Certainly.
Coming back to us. Okay, I would just say what the recommendation is, but I'm going to turn over to Mr. Labange right before that. The recommendation would be, when we get to that, approve the department's recommendations, adding street sweeping as a category, requesting the department present the administrative procedures to this committee for final approval. That's what we just agreed to.
And including large parties, amended for those two issues.
Right.
Yeah, I think, is this going to be on your website, too? It is the policy of the Department of Transportation, or is it the policy of the City Council? Or what is the policy that allows you, or what are we developing here?
Well, it would be a city council policy instructing the Department of Transportation how to process requests from
And
your
one could
office.
call, do they need political support to get a street waiver, or how do you do that?
It's our intent to have each of the council offices determine which events would be appropriate in their council district.
That's a
and then
good
they
way
would
to
send
do
us-
it, so that it doesn't, because sometimes the neighborhood council may or may not have the total picture, may request this, but yet they may not have the total picture of what is happening on that. When the president comes, though, they just tell you what they want posted, right? They don't ask you.
Yeah, I think that's
So-
really driven by Secret Service.
So what's the name of it? It's a federal protection zone or something? There's a technical name, I don't know what it is, but it overrides everything. But I think that whatever we develop in this policy, and then I would also say that the chiefs of staff should be the shot call in case you can't get to us, and then they know it's justified and give them 48 hours, or, if it's less, you have to do that. But I know over the years, in the past, as DOT has developed into its own department, breaking off from the Department of Transportation and et cetera. In the olden days, you could make one call, and it pretty much was a thing, but I think the policy at the time has grown now that there are some policies that have to be done and have to be evenly distributed across. Okay, thank you.
I might add to Mr. Labange's point about Secret Service and all that, there was incredible cooperation. We were very happy. I did make a statement prior to the president coming that I thought it would be a simple movement, and it was. I think when they went to Mr. Labange's district in the early days there, Hancock Park, and they had done those hard closures, they created already a rough situation got worse, but the lessons have been learned, and just again on the record, I was on the phone with the White House that morning as the president was about to land, and
Who are you talking to at the White
the
House?
cooperation was terrific with the administration. I just want to applaud them for being sensitive to the gridlock that we have in our great city. Mr. Parker, you want to add?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. One thing I was just wondering, on these criteria, should we have something that this, I know you in one part said it's being used on a limited basis, but should we also say that it's a very temporary usage of this criteria? The other thing, I just want to clarify, I think if we just use a general term of large parties, I think you create a problem for yourself, because one of the greatest enforcement tools for out-of-control large parties is traffic enforcement. And so I don't know if there's a more qualified way to say it, because every large party is a legal large party. And so I think that's a concern of mine, because I know we, DOT and LAPD, uses an enforcement tool of large parties. A great deal of it is traffic enforcement, to get people either to move on or to stop disrupting the larger neighborhood. So I don't know what the right words are, but I think large parties may be just too inclusive.
What do we say, special event instead of large party? Because Mr. Parks is so right, and some of the most challenging times for police officers trying to bust up a party. You know, where some officers I know paid the ultimate price because of parties. So maybe we should call it special events instead of parties.
There's some wording that we should come up with that.
Well, I think the department's going to work on that, and then you'll see the procedures and that definition before you fully adopt that, so.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and I saw Brian Gallagher moving his head a little bit here and there. I'm sure he'll stick his head into it as well.
Yeah.
And the whole department will, with the
And just to
comeback.
add to what Mr. Parks said, that they also have a number, let's say 2, because you don't want a party house to be always asking for this, so maybe like limit it 1 or 2 a year if it's some unusual. Unless it's the President of the United States or the councilman of the 11th District.
I was going to say, or Tom Labange, of course. Okay, so any more comments? Yes, Mr.
No, I just wanted to agree with Tom's comments. I think we don't want to be giving out random party excuses, on a weekly basis or something, but hopefully, if someone has a special event and they have 100 people, we can figure out how to do it on a very occasional basis, because we certainly don't want to be contributing to problems that we're trying to fight. At the same time, we don't want to hamstring ourselves and cause ourselves problems in the community.
And as someone said earlier, we'd like to get it on our websites to people understand and interact and have some clarity. Information is power. Thank you. So we're going to move that forward. And when will you report back with us?
I think the clerk had a,
John White, City Clerk, thank you. Are you holding this in committee pending the report back from DOT?
no, I think we
Or
need to
just go to
approve that so
council?
the whole council sees that, and then
Okay,
Yeah.
That's cool.
thank you.
Allows more discussion on the council floor for input, and then comes back, and then we do a final.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Item number 3.
Item number 3 is the DOT report relative to an application for grant funding from Caltrans for the state routes, or Safe Routes to School Cycle 10 program and proposed list of projects.
And we have Dr. Tom Williams to speak on the subject. Come on up, Dr. Williams. You can stay where you are. It's okay. We're friendly. Yeah. He liked the fact we captured the street sweeping, which of course is an issue.
Yeah, I'm very relieved. That would have
right now over.
That would have been a big miss with
Big miss.
Shivas and Jewish holidays if we didn't capture that. So.
Doctor, do you want to go after he speaks?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Wanna hear
Hand
what-
signals there. Okay, go for it.
Good afternoon. Arsen Mangasarian with Department of Transportation. The report in front of you dated February 15 from the General Manager of Department of Transportation is a request for authorization to submit grant applications to Caltrans to compete for the Safe Route to School, the Cycle 10 of the state funds. And there's a list of projects attached your report and also a revised list that I provided to you later on.
How competitive is this? I see you have 16 on the list and different locations, I see it, and so on and so forth. In this report, you have listed 16 projects that were going to be submitted, and now you've revised the report to 13.
To 14.
14.
14,
Why has
yes.
it changed?
Well, as early as yesterday, the staff was still working on some information on these projects, and we were notified yesterday that one of these projects needs extensive amount of investigation, so we're proposing to defer this project to the future. I have personally looked into this project, and I feel that we can produce a good project if we think about it a little bit more in details, and a lot of aspects of the project can be done through the department's regular program. Another project was also referred to be done because we feel it's more economical to do it through the regular department's activities. So there are two projects that we were planning to submit applications for that we're proposing. One to be deferred to future, and one to be deferred to be completed through, or investigated and completed through the regular work that department does.
And this is going to be competitive, correct?
This list, the 14 projects on the list are extremely competitive, Mr. Chair, and I have a lot of confidence in this 14. And this is all the list I've received. This is one of the first time that we are producing, and we're submitting application for all the requests that we received. There's 14 projects here, about over 30 schools are involved in here, and some of them, as you can see, we kind of combine them together to be able to do them a little bit
Is there
better
anything
job.
we need to do to actually continue to be pushing for this award funding?
During the application preparation process, I'm sure the project manager will contact your offices for any letters of support, and we really appreciate those. Those are very influential in convincing Caltrans and the people who are reviewing these projects. You know, the support from the council and the mayor's office is extremely important.
Because if we get our expectations raised, for instance, I see in my district significant schools that are hugely impacted and
Absolutely.
obviously would want it. So it's going to be hard to pick between schools and other areas as to who gets it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I will be returning here and report on the success of this list to you, and then I have a lot of confidence in this list.
What's your sense of timing on this?
Well, the applications are due to Caltrans on March 31st. Caltrans, their staff takes about 12 weeks, 3 months, about 3 months or 2.5 months to review them. So we should hear about this maybe at the end of summer or early fall.
Okay, and I don't want to get too provincial here, but I noticed that 3 of my CD11 projects were not included, and the report mentions that these projects can be implemented through LADOT's regular work program. What do you need from me to ensure that this gets done?
We will have a discussion with your staff later on, and to see that, as you see, one of the requests in the application was traffic enforcement, and the traffic enforcement is not eligible under the guidelines of the grant. So we need to look into some other measures to see if we can resolve the traffic issues on those locations. These, as I mentioned before, are more suitable to be done through our regular work that the department does, and we will be willing to work with your staff and the staff of Council District 14 and 15 to see what we can do. Maybe we can kind of change the nature of the project, or maybe we can do something more suitable to what can be done. And to be honest with you, some of these projects may be done before we get the grant for the other projects.
How much money are we looking at in this?
It's $45 million for 2 years. So that's what we're shooting for. We normally get about somewhere between 6 to 8% of the pot. We're 10% of the population of California, so we're a little bit under, but, that's a different discussion we can have later on.
When you do these with the schools, what cooperation do you get with the LAUSD and how they work with us, and are they part of a process we go through to get support?
LAUSD has been cooperative, but we get more cooperation from the principal of the school if that principal is involved.
in the affairs of the transportation and the PTA,
The PTA, which are the neighborhood people. They bang on my door a lot about Walgrove Elementary and, Beethoven over there and elementary, and they've been very successful by their own energy in the community. We've put up slow down signs, we put up some humps in some areas, we put up a traffic signal in another area. So the cooperation between the parents and the principals are key, correct?
That's correct. We're trying to balance this process as other DOT staff that were here. We're just trying to make this equitable throughout the city and balance the budget too, so we can address all the council offices in their issues, also all the neighborhood communities.
Beautiful. I know my colleagues want to speak as well, but Mr. Williams, do you want to speak right now so we can go forward?
Yep.
Please.
Dr. Tom Williams, LA 32 Neighborhood Council. We were very happy to see the listing. Unfortunately, being very provincial, not much for El Sereno. So one of the issues that did come up was that, I say, we noticed this program, but nobody knew anything about it. So now we know quite a bit more about it. But it's a matter and I've been communicating that we'll present it to the LA Neighborhood Council Coalition, which usually has anywhere from 30 to 50 neighborhood councils, but we didn't hear of it really until today. We heard, something about it. It's something like the Tiger program that went through the mayor's office or the MTA call for projects. We don't hear about these things. We can support, we can help if we know when the deadlines are. This one's passed. So we'll prepare for the next one, if we know when the next one is. So we're trying to help because that helps our community. We do things like cover vacant ground in the parks and things like that. We try to help our neighborhood because that's what we're there for. So we'd like to have more coordination between the Department of Transportation and the neighborhood councils directly so that we can help them get more money perhaps. Maybe we can put enough people in front of commissions and our boards to help get the money for El Sereno and for the rest of LA. Thank you.
On that point there, how much outreach did we do involving community and coming up with this list?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Before Caltrans even announced the availability of the funds, which was in January, we sent out a notification on December 19th, and then we follow up with another notification late in December, and we extended the deadline, our deadline, to submit nomination forms to January 20th. There were ample time to do the nomination forms. Also, we had a lot of contact with the neighborhood councils. I had personally conversation with neighborhood councils, and what Dr. Williams is bringing here has a lot of merit. I agree that, and I think we can do a better job of communicating with the neighborhood councils there. But we're doing everything that we have right now. Everything is in our power. I have taken his email address and everything, and he's going to be on the notification. Also, we need to work with DUN, Department of Neighborhood Empowerment, to announce this. Maybe they announced it once, and I checked, it is on their website. The issue of the neighborhood councils and the neighborhood getting involved in the process, we as a department, we welcome that. We always have welcomed that issue, and we're willing to work with the neighborhood councils.
Appreciate that. Please.
Ken Husting, LADOT. Just real briefly, I want to point out clarification. When we did send an email notice out, it did go to all the neighborhood councils in the city of LA, went to the officers, or at least the president of the neighborhood councils, and we did work very closely with some neighborhood councils that had expressed interest in the process as well as the potential projects. We have discussed this internally in DOT. We want to do a better job of outreaching. So not only do we send email notification to DUN, which goes out to the neighborhood councils, we're also going to take information to Neighborhood Congress as it becomes available. so that people are made aware beyond just the presidents, maybe to whatever officers attend these events. So we're going to do the best we can to make sure that they're notified of these opportunities.
Great, appreciate that all very much. Colleagues?
I would just say, if I could, and I'm going to work on this year, try to change the name of the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment to the Department of Information and Neighborhood Empowerment, because it's all about information. Information is knowledge is power. And the challenge that we have, Maria could be with the Friends of the Library, who are very active around the 70 libraries of our city. Your man right there who's on his BlackBerry, he could be with the Parks, the Park Advisory Board, and on down the line, the Community Advisory Board, etc. Now, but when you get to schools, it's a different constituency. You cannot walk on a school, no matter if you're from a neighborhood council or what. When I walk into a school, I must write down and identify myself. So the communication, which you're really focusing on at schools, we really should try to bridge with the schools. The toughest jobs our department have is the plan to play catch-up to the new focus that we have always had, but really trying to push, is on neighborhood involvement. Because the neighborhood involvement of a neighborhood council is different than a Friends of Ivanhoe Elementary or Friends of Franklin or the PTA. It's a different constituency, but still have similar goals. So our job is try to make it simpler for you, and I would rather push on the city clerk's office to be more responsible in that way. It's all about the information. And then if you get the information, it's about your next steps to do that. I wanted to make that point out. We'll work on it in 2012.
Well said.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other colleagues want to comment on this at this point? Mr. Parks?
One of the things I was wondering, I didn't hear what's your contact with the council offices?
When was the contact?
No, I mean, what is the outreach to the council offices?
It's through emails.
Your emails?
We actually did have an interdepartmental task force
Yes,
meeting too.
yeah.
That was an invitation for all the council offices to get together, review the projects, nominate projects, review the process, approve the process.
What number of projects came in to get this list of 20?
All of these are included, all of these are projects, that's it, that's
I'm
not
saying, how many came in to get the list of 20?
20,
Only 20 came in?
yes,
For the whole city?
yes.
Okay. See, the same comment I'm going to make again is that when you look at the projects, probably the areas that had the largest number of schools built in LA County is the 8th, 9th, the north part of the 15th, and probably the 1st. Yet they're not on the list at all about schools. That's where they've spent billions of dollars to build new schools, and so we have more access to kids going to school, more safe routes to school. And this seems to be, and the last time I was at a meeting, we discussed grants and money. That seems to be a trend that this donut hole called the middle of the city just doesn't get any attention. You find your way down to CD 15 that's generally very south into San Pedro or Wilmington, but when you get to the north part of it, there's no activities. There's rarely any initiative on the 8th and 9th, and then on the north part or the south part of the 1st that we butt up against, it's rarely there. And you're talking about some of the most densely populated communities, and you're also talking about communities that were designed to absorb the bulk of the new schools because of the number of young people that were being bused across the city now get to go to their home schools. So I just don't understand how we can continually ignore the vast part of the middle of the city on grants and activities that clearly warrant that kind of attention. And particularly when we know, I think in 8th district, the 9th district alone, I think they built 30 schools. I mean, brand new schools in the last 3 or 4 years. How do we not pay attention to that volume increase and not find the ability to get safe routes to schools to those kids? I mean, it's mind-boggling.
Well, we welcome input from the council offices as far as projects that they think would be very competitive, as well as we are looking at the data. We're trying to become more data-driven to see where the greatest need is, and we're doing a huge effort.
Do you look at where the schools are located and the volume of schools that were recently built?
We do look at that
The
information.
volume is where?
The volume? I don't personally look at that information, but we do have
Schools that have been
that.
built in the last 4 to 5 years is in the areas that there are no safe routes to school. I mean, so that to me is if we're talking about where the need is, and when we're talking about where the bulk of the young people that go to school, that are school-aged children, they're not represented in these figures. and to say, well, we got 20 grants or 20 requests and that's all we had, that's pretty well ignoring what our knowledge is of the city and what the needs are. I mean, so I just have a concern that every time we get one of these type of grant requests, there's a major void in a certain part of the city that we just kind of, they don't exist.
Let me say this, Mr. Park makes a good point. I'm just looking at the list itself and how people got on the list, and just for everybody who's listening to this, the nominating organization is really where a lot of this energy is coming from to put the list together. And as you can see, Bureau of Street Services, LADOT, where you see LADOT, which is a nominating organization, that raises the issue that Mr. Parks is saying. In my particular case, just to go on the record, my deputy identified 3 of them in my office, and that's how, they got on the list, was that kind of outreach by my own office. And one of them in my district has the LAUSD did it itself, and their doctor, their professor brought it up. So I'm just assuming that when you do your outreach, you contact the council offices, you contact the other departments, and you also contact LAUSD when I see them down here. So his point is well taken. The outreach is the key element to this, and there are a lot of schools. Is there any comment on the particular districts that Mr. Parks just mentioned?
Well, in the past, we have been very successful in securing grants for those districts that Mr. Parks had mentioned. And I can give you a detail of all the...
Because I think every time you bring a grant thing, we bring up the same subject.
Yeah.
I think maybe the last grant process, there were a couple of projects, but historically, the areas of the 8th, 9th, the north part of the 15th, and the 1st are void of consideration.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Mr. Parks, but let me add that, the department has a division dedicated, and that division works diligently with the council offices. What I'm trying to say here, that this is not the only way to get projects done. There's no guarantee that we're going to get funded for this project. There are the projects that are utmost important. I think they should be on the top of the department's list, and those projects have to be pursued.
Let me just disagree with you. I think the issue is, if you keep producing the same thing, you keep getting the same thing. And so the issue is, this is a 2-year cycle. It's $45 million in the state. We're going to get somewhere between 6 and 7. So if you're not in this trend, you're not going to be considered for another 2 years. And so if we keep producing projects out of the same districts, they're going to be well taken care of. And if you keep ignoring the same districts, they're not going to be taken care of. I think the last one, and if I remember correctly, that we had this discussion on, dealt with, I think, bike lanes or something, to where...
I think it may have been Measure R.
Something,
Yeah.
Measure R or something, but historically, if you go back and look at these items, you'll find that there is a routine view of the central part of the city not being a part of the discussion.
Mr. Rosen, I just want to add something. In my time with John Ferraro and before, and they would have meetings with the deputies. The departments would constantly. So I would suggest in the future, and I'm looking at your general manager, when there's something that comes up, have an invitation to everybody and list for the report that comes that all councils, all of us were invited to come on August 12th, 2010, or whenever the first start was, to identify it and empower. I do believe there's been a disconnect between the council and departments because of the new charter in some ways. And I think we have to retool our thoughts on that, because I think there's some, not just your department, it's just the process. And anything I would say, if we got it down to the motor pool right now and got a van, and we drove to those new schools, I think you would see a lot of improvements that were built in the new schools, such as curb cuts, such as bus lane cutouts, such as around the facilities. I think the district has done much of that, Mr. Parks, in the planning and construction process of the new schools. Say it again?
I think you're speculating.
I'm not speculating. Let's go in the motor pool right now.
I think if you go out in the district, many times the schools look no different than the community they're built in.
Well, I think if you look at the curb cuts and look at the length of the street where they have the indentation, where so you're not offloading children in a parking lane, but there's an indentation, that is, a lot of that work has been done with the new schools. And I was at a stoplight at 4th and Spring, and I ran into a guy from LA Unified who was sitting there at a cafe, and he's still building schools, and they have made these improvements. But I would just say, retool the basics of saying, to the council person, please assign a deputy. And then it's up to us if we miss it, and then put it in the report, invited, not attended, or whatever, because that's what you have to do, I think, in this challenging time. And sometimes our best eyes and ears of our districts are our field deputies. Thank you.
Other comments, colleagues? So moved. So the recommendation is, Mr. Parks?
I'm going to vote against.
Okay, to approve recommended project application list for the state Safe Routes to School program.
As amended to reflect the revised list of projects.
Yeah, so it appears we have 3-4, and Mr. Parks is against this.
That in this report, when it comes to council, if there's anything that has been done regionally by the city, not necessarily by council district, but say regionally, the central area, you have how many regions in your department?
There's please.
5 regions. State what you have done in these regions.
Okay.
I think regionally, if we look at it, because our borders may vary and change, whatever the case, but in the central area, you're doing so much, in the west area, and the south area, harbor, the valley area.
Let me just ask this of Mr. Parks, since this is a real live moment here. If Mr. Parks and you all had a meeting, and he went through his list of issues and so on and so forth, could it change this list and we could amend it at council if, in fact, he's made a compelling point that obviously he wanted to make here just now? Could that be done?
Yeah, absolutely. We can meet.
You don't think you have the time? What is our time frame in council action?
It actually, there is a little bit to the time frame. There is a lot of outreach and coordination with the schools that needs to take place in preparation of the application.
Right.
There will be another cycle, federal cycle that's coming up. We're expecting it in roughly 6 months. It does vary. And so perhaps, we could be better prepared for specific areas in the city for that process. So I think we have an opportunity in the future to go ahead and address different areas.
Okay, so to say that clearly then, I would like us to make sure we do that when we do our outreach for the next round, and make special effort for the 3 CDs that he mentioned that seem to get overlooked, and there's been a tremendous amount of construction. I obviously want his support because I want all the kids in the city of Los Angeles to have a safe routes program. So
Absolutely.
can we count on that getting the priority attention?
Of course, Councilman.
At that point?
That's 2 years from now.
He says 2 years from now. We don't want to do it 2 years.
No, there's
every
a
year.
state cycle and there's a federal cycle.
Okay, so every year, so there is, and we have a 6-month window for this.
Roughly for a federal cycle that will be coming up. Yeah.
All right, so moved and so done, and look forward to that report back and everything before the council. Item number 4.
Item number 4 is the DOT and Planning Department joint report relative to the update of the mobility element of the city's general plan.
And I see beautiful map of some sort there, which will be, what is that, Mr. LeBlanc? I call it a graphic. A graphic, Mr. LeBlanc calls it. And what I'd like to do at this point is have you take us through the graphic and other things, and then we'll go forward with action on this, which will be a note and file report, by the way.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Jane Choi. I'm with the Department of City Planning. I'm here with
Sean Hyrie, Department of Transportation.
and we're here to give you an update on a progress report on the mobility element update project. The mobility element is part of the City of Los Angeles general plan. It is the city's transportation blueprint, and the last time the element was updated was in 1999, so it's been about 13 years, and the current update process began in July 2011. This current fiscal year, it's a 3-year process, with the first year being funded by Measure R. And the end goal is to give the city a transportation plan that reflects our really new, exciting updates in our transportation system in the last 13 years. And there is really an urgency to this because over the last 13 years, there have been new rail investments, there have been public support for progressive solutions to our transportation system, as indicated by the passage of Measure R. And just as an outdated land use plan hinders the development and the values, reflects the values of, does not reflect the values in development that follows an outdated plan, for our mobility plan, it is really important to have new standards that really reflect the city's needs today and to meet our complete streets mandate. So the components of the plan include a policy document with new goals, objectives, policies, and programs, which will be developed with public input, a complete streets network of modal priorities. We're going to be redesignating over 1,500 miles of arterial streets to reflect new complete streets objectives and priorities. We will be having a new street standards and streetscape manual to guide city staff in the implementation of future street investments. We'll have new performance measurements for our streets, as well as an implementation strategy. For the past 8 months, staff from DOT as well as planning have been working together on analyzing our existing conditions, and we launched the LA to B campaign, which is to engage Angelinos in a meaningful dialogue about our transportation future. So these are 2 boards that we will be showing at our workshops that are our Think Labs that are happening this Saturday as well as next Saturday throughout the city. This LA to B infographic shows existing conditions, demographics information about our city, how we commute, and talks about how we compare with other cities, and the other board here describes the principles that we will be using to build our complete streets network.
Mr. LeBron?
Yeah, thank you very much. I don't want you to change anything in the 4th district, whatever the 4th district becomes, until we go drive it, okay? What do you think of streets like Sherman Way, Roscoe, et cetera, Olympic Boulevard? These are east-west corridor streets. What do you see proposed generally, if you know those streets well enough?
Well, currently, we have been looking at how these streets perform. So we know, for example, in the Valley, Van Nuys Boulevard is a heavily...
That's the north-south. I was going east-west first. So what I'm saying too, if you look at the maps, the historic maps, you'll see the trails of the Los Pobladores, which walk from the Mission to other missions to the Pueblo. Then you'll see a few years later the railroad of the Pacific Electric. And then you see the freeways and the grid system of the city. I want to keep the grid. I believe in big traffic on big streets. I believe every street should be channelized so you have safe left turns, and at busy intersection there'll be a tri-light for a passage of that. In addition, I believe corresponding corridors, like Western Avenue, that you could use Oxford, which is just to the east, as primarily the bicycle street, as opposed to Western, which is limited. That you could use New Hampshire, which is west of Vermont, is primarily the bicycle street, because I challenge the department's action right now to take away capacity without clearing capacity. So I'm excited about new thinking and the statistics that you have there, but I don't want you to change anything in my district until we look at it completely. Barham Boulevard you have some plan for, which is a max street. It's not widened. And also the Bureau of Engineering should be here. Are they involved with this at all, or is it just DOT and who else?
This is an exercise within DOT and city planning. This is a planning.
Yeah, where's
document.
engineering though? Because when I'm developing a building, if I am a developer, and I come, there's a requirement to do street widening or whatever the case may be. In some cases, we're doing bump out. And I know you're well into this, but I'm looking at your general manager. Somehow engineering should be looped on this. And also, I do want you to designate major streets that will continue to be major streets. We're fooling ourselves if you go from 67, and if you take away capacity, that you could create it. The most important person that I've met in your department who is so effective is Pauline Chan in neighborhood protection. And that's what I'm about, is neighborhood protection. But at the same time, in an old historic district, you do have the traffic corridors that must remain. You only have Wilshire Boulevard that is a full-width street from Parkview west. Then you go to Olympic, which is full-width. And to the north, Beverly is not. Third is somewhat limited, et cetera, et cetera. You go to Hollywood Boulevard or Sunset, east-west in the metropolitan area. But I think this is a good start. But I do believe you have to not only designate a downward, but also what it should exist as a capacity. Because when the freeways get jammed, Washington and Adams become the corridor. Venice Boulevard is a great opportunity to look at, San Vicente, et cetera. Yes.
So this is the process we're going through. We're not looking at each corridor all by itself in a vacuum. We're looking at corridors in a bunch. So we look at 3 corridors, for instance, like Jane was starting to say, Van Nuys, Van Owen, and Sepulveda. We're looking at 3 of them as a group and see which one lends itself more to moving cars, which one is, for instance, Sepulveda is an
I think you need everyone, but I want to see complementary streets, and I know it's a little tougher in the valley. We're fortunate with the grid of Los Angeles metropolitan. You have a major street and you have side streets right next to it. Ventura's challenge is that it's right up to the hills. There's more park for part of it, but it doesn't have the length that you have, let's say New Hampshire, whatever the case may be. But I think we should look at this. This is a good step, but I want to preserve the grid system because I've seen the work that you've done. I think 7th Street is fine. That's a great transition. But I see what you've done to Spring Street, and you get down to Olympic Boulevard, you're down to 1 lane through. That's a choke point. And one of the things we should do is look to remove choke points. So we got to balance this out. But I don't want anything done to my district that I represent, whatever it is, until we have a time to meet and look at it. And also I want to bring community groups in and other advocates for cycling and whatever to have some plan so we could help.
Yes, we completely agree with you, and we're actually in the first year of a 3-year planning process. So this first year is devoted to visioning and working with the community to hear about what kind of transportation system they want to see in the future. So that's going on right now. There's plenty of time to get participation and hear from the public.
I'm excited, but I just wanted to make that hard point.
Also,
Yes.
one more response. The Department of Public Works is being engaged through the Street Standards Committee, which is a committee that consists of the Department of Transportation, City Planning, and Public Works. So we are
Good.
working.
So you have that.
with
That's a
them.
very important element of it.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, let me speak first. I'm running over to committee. Thank you all. Thank you.
very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Tommy's multitasking. He's in another committee at the same time. He splits himself up and does a good job of that. Okay, let me just go through some quick questions, because I know we're going to end up note and filing this, but the follow-up will be as important. You mentioned the outreach response hasn't been that robust in certain parts of the city. What specific steps will be taken to encourage participation in the East Valley and in South Los Angeles?
To speak to that a little bit, we launched this LA to Be campaign to engage Angelenos in a dialogue about transportation. So there's 3 primary ways for Angelenos to participate. First is our town hall, ideas.la2b.org, and we've had over 500 Angelenos.
Explain how that works.
It's a online town hall forum, so people log on to this website, ideas.la2b.org, and city staff, we've posted questions on there, questions like, what is your favorite street in Los Angeles? What are some commuter innovations that you would like to see implemented? So these questions are up, and people have come and given ideas. We have over 250 different ideas suggested by Angelenos, and it's a forum for dialogue, and we'll be posting new questions every 6 to 8 weeks to continue the dialogue with the community. Secondly, we understand that,
First thing, I know the cyclists are involved in it,
Yeah,
and
definitely.
they're already right now online, right?
Yes.
One other thing about the town hall is that there are capabilities there to accommodate any language, so that the website can easily be translated into multiple languages with the click of a button. There's also a phone number, an idea line, where people who may not have internet access can call in and give their ideas, and we are listening to those ideas and including it in our input as well. As part of our input. And we also have our Think Lab workshops, which are happening this coming Saturday, the 25th, at the Browdy Building in the Valley in the morning, as well as LACMA in the afternoon. And we also have Think Lab workshops happening next Saturday in El Pueblo in the morning, and at the Pacoima Neighborhood Constituent Services Center in the afternoon.
So you're out there doing it. We're going to have a round of 4 public meetings, is that right?
Yes.
Have we figured out where and when they're going to happen?
Yes. Well, they're happening, there's 2 in the Valley and 2 in the central area of the city. And going back to your question regarding participation from the East Valley as well as South LA, we found from our online town hall that these are the areas where we're not hearing from folks as much as areas like Silver Lake or downtown or the 11th district. Actually, there's a lot of participation from there. So what we're going to be doing is working with community groups that are already established in South LA and also in the East Valley, for example, with Pacoima Beautiful up there, as well as with community health councils and the LA County Bicycle Coalition does work in the South LA area, and they are part of our task force, along with other groups like Trust South LA that we have a relationship with. We plan on working through those established connections to reach the folks that we haven't heard from as much on the online town hall. We also worked with...
And those notes about those 4 public meetings, are they online now? Where
yes,
and when?
They are on our website, la2b.org. We actually printed these posters, and they're on our transit shelters across the city and our bus shelters. They're, just to reiterate, it's the meeting on Saturday, February 25th, is happening from 9:30 to 11:30 at the Browdy Building, the Van Nuys City Hall. In the afternoon, it's happening from 1:30 to 3:30 at LACMA West on Wilshire and Fairfax. On Saturday, March 3rd, the meeting in the morning is happening from 9:30 to 11:30 at La Plaza de Cultura y Artes over here on Main Street in El Pueblo. And in the afternoon, the meeting is from 1:30 to 3:30 at the Pacoima Neighborhood Constituent Services Center on Van Nuys Boulevard, just north of the 5. And in addition to these 4 meetings, staff, members of the Mobility Element team have gone out to the public to different neighbor council meetings, to Metro Service Council meetings, as well as we went to a Family Sunday event at the Natural History Museum to promote the event. So we're going out there to, in any way possible, to let folks know about this process.
Well, that's very impressive, what you just said, and where you're going and what you're doing. I know Damian Newton, who, you know, I put on the Expo Bicycle Committee, connects with the cyclist world, and what we need is to make sure that as many folks that are into that new technology and do it. I'd like to also put something on my Facebook outlining some of this as well. I think we all would like to do that. In the course of your outreach, have there been any surprises in terms of issues raised or suggestions offered?
Well, we've heard a lot of support for new ideas that haven't been implemented in our city yet, but are popular in other cities. Things such as bus rapid transit or off-board fare collection for transit, and also support for opening streets on a weekly basis to events such as Ciclovia. I mean, there's been a lot of dialogue about complete streets, and just really, it's been good to hear that the public, members of the public participating in this process, are wanting to see some of these changes happen.
Mm-hmm. Did you want to comment?
I'm happy to jump in. Ken Bernstein with the Department of City Planning, overseeing the Policy Planning and Historic Resources Division. I would just add, I think the only other surprise has been, perhaps not a surprise, but we are getting widespread participation from really all sectors of the city, and particularly from non-traditional voices who are responding to the kind of social media-oriented tools that we've put out through this new website, ideas.latb.org, and about half of the participants are age 40 or under, which is wonderful to see that we're getting new ideas. We've certainly welcomed the traditional participants in these city processes, but we're pleased that the techniques that we're using are engaging a broader cross-section of Angelenos, and we hope that they continue to remain involved in the process as we move forward, looking ahead to a 2014 adoption of the new mobility element.
Great. I just have one overall question, and I know Dr. Williams wants to come up, and my colleagues. Now, high-level policy documents such as the mobility element can sometimes be ignored or overlooked by other agencies in the city family. How are we going to ensure that there is integration, that we have a binding document, not just something that is overlooked? How do we coordinate everybody so everybody can go like this rather than like that, and you're talking together as a family?
Well, this mobility element is going to be a city document.
Your name for the record again.
Sean Hyrie with the Department of Transportation. Once this mobility element is developed and we've redesignated the corridors based on transit priority, pedestrian and bike priority, or traffic movement priority, then the counter staff at the one stop will be notified of the new designations, and they will have access to all the latest designs and recommendations. So when new developments come in, we're not asking for hodgepodge of widenings and dedications. We will basically have our staff look at the map and what's being proposed for each corridor and each stretch of the corridor, and either not ask for dedication and widening, or if they do, it might be just asking for dedication and not widening. So we have a uniform curb, and you can provide better pedestrian facilities. And like you said, and Councilman Labange mentioned earlier, that we would want to maintain some control over dedication and widening at major intersections. So if we need to provide left-hand channelization, we are able to do so and require the actual widening where we've identified as a designated major traffic moving corridor. So this document will become a guideline for our staff at the counter, whether it's the DOT, Staff Bureau of Engineering, or City Planning, so that we have a uniform approach to dealing with future street improvements and future development.
That's excellent. I appreciate that. Mr. Corrales.
Thank you, Mr. Rosendahl. First, to follow up on something that Bill said, I take it from what you said that you aren't working with any of the council offices, which I think is a big miss, to get the word out about these meetings. First, I heard about it. Mr. Rosendahl obviously hasn't put it on his Facebook or anything else, because I don't think any of us have been asked. So I think that should be rectified in short order, and you should contact all the council offices and ask us to put the information out to our email lists and Facebook and everything else, because that would be the absolute easiest way to reach thousands and thousands of people that are typically interested.
We did email all of the planning deputies for the council offices, and we dropped off these flyers to each of the offices addressed to the planning and the field deputies, asking for the posters to be posted in areas that constituents visit, field offices and whatnot. So, and some of the council offices have included our announcement in their e-blasts, so we were looking forward to more coordination as well. I would totally agree with you. The council officers are a great resource.
Yeah, I mean, anyone that isn't already doing it, you really should follow up and make sure it happens, because it is a big miss. And like I said, it may have gotten sent to my office. I never even heard about it. I don't know if anybody really focused on it. So I think you need to do follow-up on that. My other question is, I haven't dealt with this on an LA City basis before, so I'm not sure exactly what goes into this element. Is it all things that have generally been discussed in some form, or would you look at more futuristic transportation ideas like personalized rapid transit, which is, exists in a few places and the technology is being updated, but I don't think it's getting a lot of discussion yet?
The focus of this study is to identify what corridors will be transit-oriented. The detail of what kind of a transit vehicle will run through the corridor is not part of the task of this task force, although we are hearing those ideas in a different form, because if you recall our West Side Mobility study that's going on currently, we are looking into those items in more detail. So we are soliciting comments from the community on stuff like personalized transit vehicles. But the focus of this study is to redesignate the corridors and to update an element that's been basically all car-centric in the past. Now with the new thinking and all the greenhouse reduction policies and all this Complete Street Act policies, we're trying to be more proactive in developing better projects for our future and be more competitive in our funding cycles with the feds. So we are setting the basis and the foundation here by coming up with new designations for the corridors, and what you're suggesting is more of what my group is doing in the west side, because we are doing a more detailed study.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I might add, this is a suggestion, all 15 communications directors in each of the council office, you should bring them together as a group and outline it. I know my guy puts a lot of it online, and the reaction I get from my constituents is terrific. It's a helpful hint for them as well, and I think it's a service, and you should reach out to them, because most of them, I could be wrong, communication directors for us 15 elected are involved in the new media skills and are doing it. And I find myself engaged every day on it in various levels. So I think you got a natural group if you just pull them together. Periodically they get to meet each other, and they could also hear this, because this is exciting. This is a new day that's integrating things that we always believe need to be integrated, and this helps, as Ken Bernstein was saying, it's an exciting new day. Mr. Parks.
Let me ask you, it looks like we haven't updated this since '99. Is there a requirement that we do it more often?
The guidance under the state law is to update every 5 to 10 years, but unlike the housing element, which has a mandated update period, the transportation or the mobility element does not have that requirement.
Just a general 5 to 10 years?
Yes.
Okay. And then is there just been 99, what are we, over, 12, 13 years? Mm-hmm. Is there a reason why we've not addressed it in that period of time? Is that a workload issue? Or?
It is workload issue, Councilman. Unfortunately, the city is not up to date on several of its general plan elements. We are required, as Ms. Choi just indicated, to update our housing element. If we do not keep that up to date, there are significant consequences in terms of funding and sanctions from the state level. However, the other elements do not come with those mandatory requirements. The transportation element from 1999, a great deal has changed in this city in terms of transportation, transit investment, and mobility since 1999. So our department did prioritize this request to move forward as really a centerpiece element that shapes much of our community plan work and our follow-up policy and implementation work around the city.
Is this one of those items that, I can't remember correctly, but that's going through a lawsuit because we've not updated our infrastructure?
No, I think you could look at it as tangentially related to that. The lawsuit that is ongoing and is before the appellate court right now has to do with reporting and monitoring related to growth in infrastructure and language that was in our general plan framework, which is the kind of highest level policy framework under which our individual elements of the general plan then come.
Yeah, okay. And I would just say the same thing on the outreach. I think, it's we've probably proved it on a variety of times that certain parts of the city are not necessarily connected to the computer. And so, and then when we look at the meeting schedule, there are no meeting schedules south of Wilshire Boulevard. And there's probably a handful of people that live south of Wilshire Boulevard. And so I think knowing where we don't have the computers, there's more of an emphasis of bringing meetings to the local community and to use those resources, either nonprofits or council offices, to help get that word out, because we hear as much in the 8th district as it relates to traffic and congestion as anybody else. But again, that's why we are very sensitive about when that large area south of the 10th freeway seems to be ignored. But again, people have a great deal of input about what and how their quality of life is impacted by traffic and transportation.
Yes, Councilman, we completely agree with you. We would just add the meeting locations were scheduled in portions of the city where we did not have active community plan updates. Obviously, the focus of our community plan program in recent years has been on South Los Angeles, Southeast, West Adams, Leimert area. We deliberately scheduled meetings in areas where we have not had an active dialogue about mobility and planning issues. We certainly want to work with you in your office and with the nonprofits and community-based organizations that Ms. Choi mentioned to increase our outreach in South Los Angeles. But we would mention, in many ways, the mobility strategies that are being developed through the element have been bubbling up through the community plan process that's been ongoing in the South Los Angeles region, where we are already piloting many of these mobility strategies, as well as with the transit-oriented development work that is taking place along the blue and green lines in South and Southeast Los Angeles. So much of that input is heavily influencing this process through the work that is ongoing in the South Los Angeles region, and we want to continue to work with your office to increase that outreach.
Thank you. Any comments from anybody else at this point? Okay, please, Dr. Williams. Now you heard it all.
Then we can go home. Dr. Tom Williams, LA 32 Neighborhood Council, also in the Sierra Club Transportation Committee. Basic principle that we have is no new travel lanes. Make the existing system work better. Make it work efficient. Good example, Huntington Drive, 3 lanes each way. In the morning, approximately 7% of the 3,000 cars per hour have more than one occupant. Boom, efficiency. Number of passenger miles versus number of vehicle miles. El Sereno basically fills up 2 buses going into town every 20 minutes. From Arcadia or from Alhambra, no problem getting a seat. But by the time it leaves El Sereno, it's full, standing room only. So there's a real issue regarding mobility. Do we mean easier for the private car, individual drivers, to make it into downtown LA? Because we suffer from the entire western San Gabriel Valley. On Valley, on Huntington Drive, on Figueroa, on San Fernando Road, and from Colorado and Navarrete. So we're quite concerned about this particular effort, and kind of the lack of contact for outreach. There's a letter that was issued about a week ago. It said, okay, there will be think labs, whatever that is, from the 25th until 3rd of March. Didn't give us a venue, didn't give us a time, didn't give us a whole bunch of things. So again, they have a problem with outreach.
Thank you, Doctor. Appreciate your comment. This is a note and file. When are you going to report back and give us an update, and how often will we have updates, and what's your sense of the overall time frame for what we're doing here?
So in terms of next steps, we will be having this round of workshops this Saturday and next Saturday, and over the next 3 months after the workshops, staff will be compiling a document, draft goals, objectives, policies, and programs, as well as a draft Complete Streets Network and cross-sections to present to the public again in June for input. And from that point, we will be going into an environmental review process for our second year, if funded. And the third year will be spent on the adoption process and going back out into the public. So you should be we'll come back to the committee for another report probably around the time of the June workshops to update you on our progress.
Very good. Ken, do you want to add something to that from the planning perspective, how you see this timetable?
No, I think, as Ms. Choi indicated, we are happy to report back on a regular basis as we hit some of the milestones. I think June would be an appropriate time to do that. We certainly want to keep the committee apprised, and obviously this is the first of a 3-year program. Only the first year was funded in the budget. We obviously think that we've made significant progress during this first year and look forward to working with you to see the project continue forward in the budget and move toward adoption over the next 2 years.
Thank you. And Sarah, give us your thought at this point of note and file and update.
Well, we'll continue working with city planning. We have a very good cooperation. We have representatives from every major bureau and division in DOT. In our committee, we meet every other week, and we'll continue to do so until we have enough progress to report back by June.
Are we comfortable then for a report back in June as the next period, or would you want an update before that, because the reason I say this is the compelling budget realities will come before the Budget Committee in late March and April and May. And I would think you've been funded through this fiscal year, correct?
Correct.
So I think you need to come in earlier with a pitch of what we need to do and how we need to do it, and compelling for the funds, because we're back to one of these situations where the rubber hits the road. And since we all believe the coordination, cooperation of all the various governmental bodies is key, and we also obviously believe that public input is essential for us to go, I think it would be better, it is now February, March, April, if by beginning of May 1st, that you come back with stuff that I know you'll be working through the process of the budget, but if there's any particular moment in time where we could engage if we need to, I want to give you that opportunity. So how about a report back, if it makes sense to everybody, on May 1st, or thereabouts, whenever our committee meets in that very first beginning of May, to see if we can work it in, or the last part of
Yeah, we're usually in budget. They wouldn't really know what their next year's budget is until the end of May, so I think maybe our second meeting in May would work. I mean, this is a note and file, as the chair said, so it will go to council, and that'll be an opportunity as well to brief the whole council on what's going on.
Okay, sounds good.
We appreciate the suggestion.
So moved and so directed with that time frame. Thank you all very much for that. And Mr. Williams, we thank you too for your input. Okay, any other new business, colleagues? Anybody want to bring up anything? Okay, no more public comment. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. Thank you.